All right, good morning, everybody. I am going to call to order the public meeting number 124. Chairman Crosby is on his way, but the first item on our agenda concerns Region A, and so I will be acting as the chair for that portion of the meeting. And having called the meeting to order, I'm going to recess immediately because there are some ongoing developments with respect to the first item on the agenda, and I'm going to give them a few more minutes to work themselves out, and then we'll come back and proceed with that agenda item. But I did want to say something as to why we're simply sitting here, and it's 10:30 and nothing's happening. So we'll be in recess for a few more minutes, I think 5 to 10 minutes, and then resume and deal with the first item on the agenda. All right, good morning again. We're prepared to proceed with meeting number 124. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. I'm going to save that until all five of us are together and go to the third item on the agenda, which is the Region A Fundamental Inconsistency Petition. Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm very pleased to report that both Wynn and Somerville have been actively working over the last 48 hours, and that the City of Somerville has withdrawn its petition, its fundamental inconsistency petition, pending execution of their final surrounding community agreement that the parties have worked on.
That's truly excellent news, not only substantively, but for the spirit of cooperation that it manifests. So I think congratulations are in order for both the city and for the Wynn interests as well in getting that done. So
it's good news.
So that being the case, and that'll be executed, the anticipation is promptly, right?
Very promptly.
Okay, great. So that really is the only item of Region A business that we had this morning. And Chairman Crosby is en route. He was not planning to be here for that first piece of business because, as I mentioned a minute ago, it involves Region A. But he'll be here shortly, and we'll resume with the rest of the agenda, beginning with item 2, but we'll now be in recess until 11 o'clock, given this delightful but unexpected development.
Good to go. Let's see, I guess we are reconvening public meeting number 124. No, we're going to actually go straight to Blue Tarp, right?
We haven't done
minutes. Haven't done the minutes. Okay. So we'll start out with the approval of the minutes. Commissioner McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes are in the packet, the meeting materials packet. I would move their approval by the Commission with the usual reservation of the ability to correct typographical and mechanical errors.
Second?
So moved. Second.
Anybody have discussion, corrections? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. You've managed the FIPS issue. Now I think we are going to temporarily adjourn meeting number 124 and reconvene meeting number 123, where the principal topic was MGM, and go to item 4 on our agenda, which is the Region B evaluation deliberations. And where are we, General Counsel Blue?
Thank you, Commissioners. Last night, we made revisions to the agreement to award a license. We have shared those revisions with the applicant, MGM. They have had a few minor comments this morning, which we've included in the document that is before you. So I believe the draft that you currently have is the final version of that document. I believe everyone has agreed to the changes that are in that document.
I'm not sure which one I saw. Which?
What you saw was a final version this morning, yes.
Okay. Do you have any comments on the draft? Or?
Good morning, Chairman Jed Nozel. We took a look at the draft last evening. We've spoken with General Counsel Blue this morning. We offered a few, I would suggest, sort of fairly minor changes around consistency and some wordsmithing, and I believe that we're satisfied with the document.
Okay.
We are. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And to staff for all their work on this.
Comments from commissioners? Everybody's had a chance to read it?
No, I certainly am delighted that we're here where we are. So this is a good agreement. This enables us to tie it up in a bow, put it on front and center, and say assuming one of those two conditions is met, everybody's ready to go, and we know exactly what the shape of the go is. So it's great.
And get our bills paid in the meantime.
Right.
Which is appreciated.
Right.
Well, we'll keep the lights on.
Right. I agree. I mean, I thought you did a really nice job of cleaning it up. It's always good that we took an extra day, and you did, it's a good document, and it absolutely says what I was hoping we would say. So, any other comments? Okay, then I think we don't have anything else to do in this meeting. We are planning on convening this meeting number 123 tomorrow morning at 10.
Yes, I believe so, yes.
At the Mass Mutual Center in Springfield, where the commission will formally consider this document and vote on whether or not to agree to sign it. Mm-hmm. And if we do, there will then be some festivities thereafter.
Signing.
And
A
some
formal
Signing,
signing
that's right.
ceremony, yeah.
formal signing
Right,
ceremony
right.
of the agreement to award.
Of the agreement.
Yes, that's right.
Of the agreement, but it's that far from the end. So
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I want to reiterate what I said multiple times yesterday. You know, it's an exciting step for us. It's a long haul for a lot of people, us included. We've had our ups and downs, but you know, the legislature had something in mind. The legislature had something, and the governor had something in mind when they designed this legislation. And I think this proposal captures it as well as it can possibly be captured. So, well done to you and to the Springfield and Mayor's Harlem.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Chairman.
All right.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
see you tomorrow.
Thanks.
All right, so we will temporarily adjourn meeting 123 and move back to convening meeting 124. And we will pick up with item number 5, administration, Executive Director Day.
Commissioner Crosby, I believe we have that on the agenda for 1 today. Yes, I don't know that we can move that forward. We have notified people who
all
want to
right.
hear that.
Are there things that we can do between?
I think, I believe it is on, we can check our agenda, but I believe we put that on for 1 o'clock.
It is on
Yes.
at 1 o'clock.
So
No, I'm sorry.
is it-
Administration is on for 2 o'clock.
For 2 o'clock.
We had anticipated, we thought there was going to be a FIPS, and we thought there was going
Mm-hmm.
to be possibility of issues on MGM. And so we had anticipated that we would break after Region B discussion at 1 and then have this topic at 2 o'clock. So I guess the question is, how many other topics here that we can bring up, even though they're going to be out of order from the published times?
I think the question is whether there are people who are anticipating
Right.
coming at that time,
Right.
and I don't know that.
Maybe to that end, I'm glancing here, there are a couple of internal discussion on item 7 relative to the legal division, that, you know, designations, et cetera, that we could easily take
Right.
out of order.
I can
For
present, I
example.
wasn't planning to present them, but I'm happy to do that. Loretta Lilios was going to come to present those, but I can address them.
Then strike everything I just said.
She is at a different meeting this morning.
Well, what time is it now? Is it like 11:15?
It's 11:30.
11.
No, I'm sorry.
11,
11
it's
o'clock.
11,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think.
Can we have a musical interlude?
Yeah. Right. Anybody want to tap dance?
We are so efficient.
Right.
Mr. Chairman and Catherine, can we, is it possible to move forward with topics under administration and then when we get to 1 o'clock later on the agenda, re-identify and ask if there's anybody else Anybody that didn't get a chance to talk about that topic?
Well, but I think
Just a
some of it
question.
we could, I mean, we could certainly go ahead with the general update. The budget discussion, I think, would be perfectly reasonable to go ahead with, and we could offer people an opportunity to speak to that if somebody had something to say. The master licensing Region C, I think we probably shouldn't undertake, because it's only fair to let people do that when we thought we were going to. And Penn National Gaming response, I don't think we should do either, unless, until we do it at the published time. We could do A and B, I think, and then we could do the legal issues. You know, it's okay if Loretta can't do it.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to
Might
do
as well
that.
use the time while we got. That'll get us a little ways into this. The emergency, what about David, item number 6? Could we go ahead with those?
I think anything that we are going to take a vote on, we need to do it at the published time.
And Loretta's involved in that one.
It doesn't say vote in there, but if there's a vote, then
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a different agenda then.
I was looking at numbers.
Yeah, but I'm looking at a different.
Oh, an earlier version, okay. Well, this is emergency regulations amendments, vendor secondary. Maybe there was a vote, I don't know, it just doesn't say vote. Probably
I think
is
that
a
was left off, but we would
It
need
is
a
a vote,
vote.
yeah.
We do
Okay.
need a vote, yes.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do what we can. And we will give anybody an opportunity at the appointed times to comment if we've somehow missed somebody. So, Executive Director Day, why don't you start with the update?
Well, let me ask. Just do a little musical chairs.
Yep. I'm sorry.
This is what, I got the right one, right?
We don't? There's no, where's Catherine?
Okay, so there is no time.
Yeah, we can move this. We do that on purpose, so we, tell Catherine.
Yeah, this is the one. So let's correct the record.
All right. So let me back up. The published agenda does not have announced times on it. Therefore, we don't have any obligation to wait. I mean, I think we could think about, if it's moving a little bit more quickly than we had anticipated, if there are critical ones, we can think about that, but we're certainly under no obligation to adhere to any artificial time schedule. So let's strike that entire prior conversation, and we will pick up item number 5, administration with Executive Director Day, and proceed through those issues. If anybody has any concerns about anybody not here, we can raise them, but otherwise, let's get going.
All right.
Great, all right. Thank you, Janice. Sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Morning.
members of the commission.
Morning.
With that, I would like to pause here with my, and have a little brief general update. And from that perspective, I think it's interesting to note that while the commission is taking action on Region B, our licensing division, IAB, have received and are processing 16 non-gaming registrants, 26 subcontractors, 3 gaming vendor primaries, 4 gaming vendor secondaries, 17 gaming vendor qualifiers. In addition, we could be looking at up to about 20 more qualifiers as the team goes through and analyzes those applications. And total licensing fee collected to date is about $68,000. So that program is moving on behind the scenes while the commission is continuing to move forward with the casino licenses.
So just to for the benefit of those who are watching, that is major licensing of major vendors to gaming establishments, and what kinds of things are they, Director Day?
Thank you, Commissioner McHugh. The gaming vendors primary are major gambling equipment machine manufacturers. And there's 3 of those. And then the gaming vendor secondary are like construction companies, non-gaming suppliers, but over 250,000, I believe, in contracts with the actual casino licensing with Penn. And then the non-gaming registrants, of course, are those that are providing services, but they're below that.
So this is licensing the suppliers and builders and others who are necessary to construct and outfit these casinos once they are opening. That process is going on now.
Commissioner McHugh, that's once they are approved to go forward, these people are getting ready to be there or are already involved with the Penn operation.
Right.
Director Driscoll, you may have already done that, but I think that update is good stuff, you know, with the kind of details that Commissioner McHugh got, not just the names of the categories, but some of the examples, if you haven't already done that. That's great.
And it's fair to say that the vast majority of those vendors are vendors that are providing services to our licensee currently,
That's correct.
Penn National.
Right. Of course, they are also anticipating some of them, in particular, the other markets as they open.
That's
up.
right. Right. That's right.
Right.
And that I know when I talked to licensing director Acosta, he was commenting that he's continuing to get busier all the time. So I think that process is moving forward. Yes. Yeah.
We were worried it was going to get bored.
Right. We didn't want him to go back to Ohio or New Jersey.
Okay. With that, let me move to the second topic under administration.
Just on just general update. Where are we in the hiring status? Who are in the pipeline at this point? What positions are in the pipeline?
Well, we are still looking at financial investigators
Right.
at this point, and we
The
have some
senior
candidates.
For the senior position?
We are considering the senior position, but we are focusing on trying to get some financial investigators online, and we'll work with them in a training capacity as we move forward.
Right, okay.
So then we're going to have that continuing to attract qualified people in some of these areas will be a challenge as we move forward.
Okay. I think we had asked Trupti to give us an assessment of our own, the makeup of diversity of our own workforce. So we kind of keep an eye on that as we're moving along. I don't think we've seen that, but I think that'd be a good thing.
no.
Didn't we ask for that?
We have that. I've seen it not very recently, but at least a couple months ago. Maybe a little bit more. If there's, I always assume that we would keep that being updated with any new hire. So I'm sure we could produce that. She could produce that, in very short order.
And we also, because we added the application form specifically for the commission, we may have data at this point too, which give us an idea of our pool. So I can definitely check with our HR manager and see if we can develop a report
Yeah,
for them.
I'd like to see that. I mean, it's important that we practice what we preach. Any other questions on general update?
Okay, with that, I'll move forward with the budget, a follow-up discussion. What we had essentially heard from the commission is there were at least three general areas at that time that we were going to focus our comments on at this meeting. One of them was regarding the high-performance project that we've been talking about. Also about, we had a specific request from Commissioner McHugh to take a look at our projected staffing versus consultants in the budget. So we've done that as well. And then the third item, which is, it's okay, we'll save that to last because I think we have the most information around that topic, which is a potential central management system for regulation in Massachusetts. And what I'd like to do is if I might, it's under 5B. What I'd like to introduce the topic a little bit today is before I get, let me backtrack a little bit. Before I get to the topic of high-performance organization, the commission did ask for additional information regarding staffing and contracting, and I'd like to touch on that real quick before we move forward. In response, we reviewed our staffing and contract estimates primarily in IEB and in legal, and we have modified our budget request, or plan to modify our budget request, to bring on 2 additional financial investigators, assuming, of course, we can recruit them, and an additional staff attorney in 2015, with a corresponding reduction of about $380,000 in contracted consultant services. Of course, our ability, as I mentioned before, is linked to our ability to recruit and hire people as we move forward. So we're going to include that, unless we hear differently, in our budget proposal as we move forward. The second topic I wanted to talk about a little bit this morning was our high performance agency, or often called performance management. To my left is Ed Burke, and I asked Ed to join us today. Ed is the coordinator for our project and has more than 30 years' experience as a management consultant with extensive expertise in strategic planning and technology, performance management, change management, and process development and redesign. Ed's team also completed the strategies and performance reports for all the other statewide shared services agencies in Massachusetts. We are in the process with our personnel process and employee accountability system review. That's the title we've assigned it. In this stage, our consultants with Ed at the point and our human resources team have developed a comparative analysis of about 170 policies and are reviewing that list with the staff team assigned to this project. The product should provide a recommended backbone for the Commission's policy manual. So that segment of the process, kind of a first step, is well underway. Our last meeting with our high performance staff coordinating group was very productive. We've got not quite a ways, but we have a significant distance to go through in our review of each one of those policy titles and determine at least our recommendation of whether or not we would ask that they be included in the manual for the Commission. On the way to creating the systems that we need to for a high performance agency, we are planning on steps we've titled as work streams number 2, goals and supporting goals, and work streams number 3. Work stream number 3, expand the strategic action plan in 2015. I'm referring to those titles because those corresponding scopes of work are in your packets under the item I just referred to. We anticipate the final phase of work stream number 4 to bring the Commission in line with the performance management tools in 2016. So I don't know if you were able to find those, but it's behind tab 5B. I think it's approximately in your manuals or your packets about 7, and if you're looking electronically, it might be with an 8th page, which I will comment on because it didn't get hard copy in everybody's packet. So the scopes, we talked about the scopes on the page 8. I want to briefly address is the project chart because we've had some discussion on timing. If you do happen to have it in your packet, it's page 8.
Page 8 of the performance work of
the scope documents.
Right.
Yes. And you may not, the hard copies, I think we didn't make it in the hard copies in time to get it printed. Electronic copies, I think we got it in there. So I'm going to speak to it just briefly. Okay. What we did is laid out the steps or phases that we anticipate for this high performance project. We are currently in phase 1 essentially, which is that project that we talked about for personnel and policies and accountability systems development. We anticipate phase 2, which is the project for goals, to develop goals and supporting goals. And we are estimating that that will probably begin sometime in August through November, October, November. Then the third phase we're anticipating, which is entitled Expand a Strategic Plan, through somewhere probably late October, early November, through June of next year. And then we anticipate, because it'll be a new budget season, we'll have to come again to the Commission and include it in the budget but we anticipate moving forward with work stream 4, which is really the implementation of the performance management tools and measurements necessary to move forward with high performance team management. So those scopes are in your packet. One thing I want to point out that we've tried to emphasize in each one of those scopes is that this isn't just about a few reports from many of our consultants. It's about a package of deliverables, and each one of them were designed around a training concept and ownership concept. So as the consultants move on, when we're through with the project, we have been able to train and get our staff familiar with how to continue to implement those in the years ahead.
Will there be particular leaders? Are there either designated individuals that are already here? Are there titles of people who will be sort of the team leaders going forward?
Right now, we have our high performance team, which is the team that's going to begin and is beginning to move forward as leaders of this particular project. And as we move forward, we'll be identifying who else needs to be directly involved or who else is interested.
Right. Okay.
And with that,
And who are the other
Actually,
team?
I should mention, Commissioner Cameron and I are part of that team, as is Director Day, of course, Derek Lennon,
Catherine Blue.
Trupti Banda. I had a senior moment there for a minute, I'm sorry.
Who are the consultants that are on the team?
Well, I'll move that over to Mr. Burke, if I might. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am leading the team and leading the day-to-day activities as we go forward. We're working with Michael and Carol, who have done a number of other projects and aspects around the Mass Gaming Commission. We have an HR professional named Joan Kuhn, who has more than 40 years of experience in human resource development, policy development, and is currently a consultant. She is bringing deep subject matter expertise to the project as we go forward. We have a technology strategist named Gerardo Escalera, who I believe you have met. In fact, he's met many of you. He's currently working with myself. He's working with Director Glennon, among others, as we look at technology aspects to support the HR process going forward. We have another consultant named Mike Harmon, who's worked with me for over 25 years, who is developing many of the detailed deliverables and procedures. Russ Meekins, who is my partner, is also on the project and working on that going forward. We're teamed, we're basically tag teaming with members of the Gaming Commission as we go forward. So pretty much any of the work that we're doing, we're involving, as Rick was pointing out, high performance team members and other members of the organization, so that they are part and parcel in the deliverables that we are pulling together. As of this point, we're on or ahead of schedule on all of the major deliverables. As indicated, the first and initial one out of the box is to get the policy manual up to date. We've completed the analysis to other organizations, both gaming and Massachusetts, and that's moving forward very quickly and is currently under review.
Is there a dashboard function that's being developed in this process somewhere?
There will be in the later phases.
Which
yeah.
phase is that?
Phase 4 actually is where the dashboard is finally developed. Although we tend to get a as we go through phases 2 and 3, we will be working on the goals and the measures that will be used to keep track of the organization going forward. So there will be some level of dashboard available. The final cascading dashboards, if you will, which will go all the way down through the organization, are completed as part of the 4th phase.
Great. Any commentary from the
No, I
commissioners?
enjoy working on this. I think it'll be invaluable to the organization. I'm pleased with the progress. Interesting conversations, what should be a policy, what is more of a directive, where do we need written instructions. So it's healthy discussions and certainly the level of expertise that we need to assist us with this.
Thank you. Great. Okay.
That will bring us to Derek Lennon, and Derek may have, I know he has comments on the budget, some general stuff, and then he will introduce John Glennon, and we'll go forward with the information relative to the central management system. Derek.
Thank you, Rick. If we could just move to the spreadsheet that's included in the packet. I did a quick summary of some of the changes that were requested, as well as my mistake from the first memo, where I had calculated full revenues for Region A based on the lower of the slots fees. So as Director Day spoke to earlier, we are moving about $380,000 out of contracted costs. That would be one attorney in the legal division and 2 financial investigators in the IEB, proposing to hire full-time positions. If we don't meet those hiring dates, it's not a big deal. We can still shift those costs back down into the contracted portion, and the commission won't go without coverage. But what we tried to do was take a look at the areas that will be long-term commission-based responsibilities and shift costs that are reasonable out of contract and move them on to full-time. I'm sure there's some additional ones, but we're just looking at the hiring patterns that we have now and the areas that we absolutely can implement, and we came up with this to begin with. On the revenue side, as I said first time around in the last presentation I made to you on the budget, we cannot charge a full year slot fee to Region A. We'll have to prorate that. Right now, I think the anticipated decision date, I won't say award date, decision date is September 12th. So this prorates those fees for 291 days out of the year, because what we were talking about was going with a daily slot fee. That way it doesn't impact when an operator decides to put a new slot on the floor or not put one on. It's just charged at the daily rate. So it brings our revenues down by about $377,000, which would increase our assessment from the 20.4 million figure I'd given you before to 20.7 million.
I'm sorry, were you going to continue?
Nope.
I had a question. So in the sheet that's here in the packet, there's a credit to the consultants line item and a debit, if you will, or an increase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a debit to consultants and a credit to employee compensation that
they net out to zero.
That net out to zero.
Yes.
At least in theory, isn't there a little bit of savings if we hire people, or are you just moving that for budget purposes and then
I'm just
figure out?
moving that for budget purposes, and then at the quarterly updates, I'll be able to tell you whether we actually save more or less, because I don't know when we'll be able to hire these people. I have a full year cost in, but as Director Day said, we're having a hard time finding candidates to fill the financial investigator roles just because of our salary levels compared to what the private sector has to offer, and the fact that if we're pulling from another jurisdiction, there are a lot of moving costs, and to provide a salary high enough to entice them to come away has been difficult at this point.
Well, just as an aside, that's something we ought to talk about if it's gets in the way of hiring people we need to hire.
So we have increased those. We started off with a much lower rate, closer to the gaming agents. We've bumped that up, and now with these last two, we've even bumped those up higher than what we had bumped up originally for the gaming agents. So we're hoping this will help us to entice people. We won't know until we actually make the offers. But we've had, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know we've had at least one offer turned down, maybe two, for the financial investigator positions. And those are the staff positions, never mind the director position. We've had multiple turned away.
What's the skill set involved with a financial investigator?
You have to have a very strong accounting background. You have to have some level of forensic accounting. You have to know taxes. So it's a very rounded, well-rounded financial person, which we think that if we bring in some of the junior level positions that are in the private sector and we send them out with our consultants while we're doing these gaming primary and gaming secondary vendor reviews, they will get the knowledge there, but it's significant training costs, so that's why you don't see as much of a drop in the consultant fee either. We're still going to have to send them out to get trained on the job while we're doing it.
Yeah,
So it'll be sitting with our consultants that get a much higher rate.
Yeah, I always thought, analysts for Big Four accounting firms or even others are a prime target for us without necessarily and many have, although it's a specialty, the forensic accounting piece. But
It's
the
no
investigating
corporate
piece, it's a
structure
little.
too. Corporate structure is the difficult part too. So when do you need to investigate? When don't you?
Right.
How do you track back? Whose asset is it? Where's the debt? So that's one of the areas that we're having.
Well, the difficulties are there, but that's a startup cost, and after the training period, it flattens out, and the return on that investment will be significant, and a decrease in the consultant fees as a result. So
yes, because then our investigation fees, our licensing fees, will actually, hopefully, make some money versus losing money and having to go back and continue billing vendor primaries as well as key gaming employees.
Right.
You know all of this, but obviously with the turnover in the administration, like the Budget Bureau, people at A&F, I mean, I know you know all these people, but you'd think there'd be a fair number of people that would be thinking about their future in state government, which is not necessarily a perfect fit, but like analysts at A&F, you'd think would be a pretty good candidate pool.
They would. They usually have the capacity to learn.
Yeah.
The other areas, I mean, you don't want to always poach from other state agencies, but we've got a division of banks in the Commonwealth.
We poached you from another
Division
state
of insurance.
agency.
Yes, you did. So those are other areas where they're used to looking at these types of data sets. That.
Right. Okay. Well, this is this is really important, and this, you just have to modulate how you raise the salaries to get the people we need, and we can't compromise too much. We don't want to lose too many people, too many good people. So.
Well, this is where work stream number 1 and 2 relative to our high performance also, comes in, because that's part of the organizational structure and some of the evaluation piece dovetails into what levels we are, compensating and other things.
Compensation analysis is a particular part of it, and in it, I'm sure the commissioners know that the recruitment process is a little chilled by the potential for the votes coming up in the fall, and that's been a factor as well. And so we've been trying to adjust where we could along those lines that Derek talked about, is not focusing on somebody necessarily with gaming experience, looking at somebody we can bring on more at the junior level. They have a solid background, then move forward with a training plan for them, and from that perspective, identify even our senior level person that we would have in the financial unit and move forward in that capacity. And with that process is the level of compensation we might pay, but it is difficult to remove that little tad of uncertainty, especially if you are already in a full-time job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you.
The budget document is currently posted on our website. We're expecting comments back by the 19th, and we'll have that ready for the next commission meeting to hopefully either make a decision to implement some of those changes or approve a preliminary budget and move forward.
So the version that you just discussed is on the website this
version is not, so I'll update this, put this up there. I just wanted to give it to you guys first before I put it on the website. But what was in the last meeting is on the website right now.
And the link with Penn?
Yes, I've already reached out to Penn. We've had a few conversations, both by phone and in person. We'll talk a little bit to that in the CMS discussion that's going to follow this. And we have additional follow-up meetings scheduled with them, I think, on the 19th.
Okay, good.
Am I correct in looking at this latest version that you have, on the revenue side, some kind of placeholder numbers which may or may not move, and what does that do in terms of assessing our licensee?
So those are very low ones that we couldn't get very good estimates from licensing on, so I just put what the fees are. Even if we get, this is one of the conversations I had, I think internally, even if we get a couple thousand of those, it's not going to change it substantially.
Okay.
So that'll come during the mid-year update, that'll come during the quarterly updates, and we'll revise down the assessments based on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
One other update I wanted to give you on the travel policy and the finance policies. The travel policy, we had awarded a contract to Accenture to review our interim policy. They have compared it to 3 other jurisdictions, the federal policy as well as the state policy, and they have given us a draft report with some findings. The main thing that they've pointed out is we're consistent with most other policies. The only areas where we vary and they'd make some recommendations are along the lines of we don't have anything that states whether we're going to pay for an extra bag or a bag if we're traveling. So they're minor clarifications, but they said these clarifications help employees, and they've seen them in some other travel policies. So I've distributed that to the group that originally helped draft the travel policy, and we hope to have that back to you within the month. And hopefully Accenture will be able to come here to provide their findings and walk through what they did. But I'm very happy with the analysis they did. They took our short policy and compared about 50 or 60 different points of it with other jurisdictions. So.
Great. Terrific.
Great.
And then on the finance policy review, the accounting firm that we pulled in has completed their initial review. They're writing up some draft reports. What they took a look at is what do we have in place in writing, which was low on our finance policies just because we've been starting up, and our HR policies. They're taking a look at what the state comptroller policies are, figuring out where we need to put stuff in writing that we don't have in writing. And then they also took a look at a former internal control plan and policy plan that I wrote at one of my previous agencies that was about 40 or 50 pages long. See how many of those policies they can implement here that just pick up and move over to save us some costs of them having to draft them. And we're hoping to get that back in the next couple of weeks, their recommendations, which I'll be able to share with the commissioners and senior staff.
Great.
Can I just mention something, because this is I would argue mission critical.
Yes.
For our own operations, and it's in my view, we really had to be of a certain size and maturity to get to the point that we are.
Yes.
And I really look forward to the final product, which is shortly forthcoming. But it's going to be very helpful for our back of the office, or the 10th floor in this case, just overall financial and accounting operation. So I'm really pleased with getting to this point very shortly.
Great.
Okay. What's next?
The central monitoring system update will be next.
It looks like that was right behind your tab 5B with the PowerPoint slides.
John Glennon, our CIO, is accompanying me. He will be able to help with a lot of the technical pieces that I can't speak to. And he helped to pull this together. Just as an overview, in January of 2014, a 3-member team was assembled in MGC, John, myself, and Kathy Barch from licensing, to take a look at one of the pieces of our statute that says we can implement, if we see the need, a central accounting system was what it was called in the statute. We took a look at what the central accounting system in other jurisdictions was, and it's actually a central management system is what it's turned into. And it doesn't only provide accounting data, but it provides regulatory data of the slots machines, the software that's running in them, the cabinets, a lot of what used to be done, and I only can speak to this because of the site visits we've been on, but what used to be done by hand and by taping is now done through monitoring software and data sets coming out of the slots machines. We went out to 3 locations. We visited the Ohio Lottery, the Delaware Lottery and Gaming Control Board, and the Rhode Island Lottery and Gaming Control Board. They're all combined. Ohio's the only one that has a separate one. And looked at the 3 vendors that are operating in this, this area, G-Tech, Scientific Games, and Interlot. We also received a letter from Penn National on May 22nd asking us not to use a central monitoring system. That letter's in your packet. We've since had a conference call with Penn. We are going to go out and see their Columbus, Ohio facility, which is run by the Ohio Casino Control Commission, not the lottery. Penn provides back-end access into their proprietary system, into their accounting and regulatory system to the Casino Control Commission there. So we're going to take a look at that, see if that gives us the same data the central monitoring system does. And what we'll try to do is work up a cost comparison, because we realize that this is an additional cost. We've never said that this is less costly than getting manual reports, auditing 10%. So what we'd try and do is take a look at what it would cost to staff additional auditors, additional IT staff, and then come up with some hardware and software in our own system to pull in all of this data, even if it's just daily snapshots, and pull all the data into one single data set that we can create bills, we can create a regulatory environment, and we can do asset management off of. So we think we had a productive meeting with Penn on that conversation. We do want to take a look at what we get out of these systems compared to the other way, but also noting the fact that we want to stay up to date with technology. We don't want to fall behind. So if this is a trend going forward, we want to make sure that we're not becoming an outlier of the non-technology side.
If what is a trend going forward?
So it's strange. We've seen in some jurisdictions, Maine, that they have a central monitoring system. Then you have places like Ohio that just came out, no central monitoring system.
Right.
Michigan didn't put in a central monitoring system. Pennsylvania has one.
Right.
So it's in between, and we just want to figure out what the benefit is that you get from a central monitoring system, and look at that long term. So if it is going to be that you move towards technology-based solutions, we don't want to be in a position where we're going to have to lay people off, create large infrastructure investments for the licensees of having to go back in and run additional wires for the feeds that come off of these machines.
Perhaps the best example is Nevada, when it comes to not implementing something like that. With their long history and high number of operators, trying to do something at this point in terms of a centralized monitoring system would be, I don't know, tremendous, very difficult logistically. First of all, there is an infrastructure question. Then there is a huge variability within, all of the licensees there, in terms of, technology and receptivity, and a long history of, standard operating procedure.
Not to mention the different types of venues. I mean, they have slots machines in airports, and
in the
so
airport,
it's not
right?
Just,
right.
It's not just on typical.
It's not just no. There would, if they ever went in this direction, there would have to be all these implementation plan, phasing plans.
What's the relevance of that to us?
Well, no, I guess he's comparing as to why some jurisdictions have them or not. We're talking about the trend, and the relevance being is it depends on the size, it depends on the existing infrastructure, which for us nothing is yet existing. It is starting. So as we move into technology, as we entertain the all-in on purely technology, it's important to compare ourselves with the jurisdictions that make sense to compare ourselves with, not just one or two because of the implications that this
So,
takes.
so I hope you're saying that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to Nevada because
Precisely.
we are so different. You know, we're going to have 3 or 4 facilities as opposed to all of the, you know, diverse locations in Nevada, not to mention 150 machines, which many of them are old technology, which because of the investment to upgrade to the new standard is significant, there won't be an appetite for doing that. So I think we're definitely a different model of a jurisdiction than Nevada. I don't think it's a fair comparison.
I'm not comparing, well, I'm contrasting us to Nevada in the context as well of the comment that Derek made, which is what would it take to go back and retrofit if we decided to do something like this in the future, near or later. If we postpone the decision, say, there's an infrastructure cost. It could be marginal, significant, et cetera.
Agreed.
But you know, somebody like Nevada at this point, you know, would be really unrealistic to do.
I had a question about, I guess I was surprised to see the number of FTEs that this system requires, you know, up 2 to 3 per shift. I would like to know more about that because it seems like when you implement technology like this, you're cutting down many times in the number of full-time employees, where I don't see that here.
So what we'd be managing is a large IT system, and the 2 to 3 people in the network operations center would, one, be handling asset moves. So they'd be moving. Anytime one of the operators wants to move a game around, they'd be managing that, taking care of the software that's going to move from each cabinet on the gaming floor. They'd be working to make sure that the software is interoperable with our central management system. So it's going to read meters correct.
But that's per shift. It would seem like a move could happen during business hours, and that person would work a day shift.
Yeah. And that can happen, and I think when we put 2 to 3, it kind of accommodates for vacation and downtime, weekend shifts.
Well, I heard as you began this discussion that you were going to go look at Ohio.
Yes.
That's key.
And going to get some more data. And I certainly welcome that. I think the cost-benefit approach and the recognition that today's cutting-edge technology isn't going to be necessarily the technology that's cutting-edge in 5 years is something we have to keep in mind. So I really look forward to both the comparative costs of dealing with things and a hard look at what happens if a decision one way or the other is made now. But by that I mean in terms of the technology, it seems to me that the retrofit argument is surely a valid and sound one. On the other hand, installing a large, expensive network today is in a very similar, can have a very similar effect, freezing us into something in an environment that potentially will change in the relatively near term. I don't know how you quantify the risks, but it seems to me we need to take that into account in our overall analysis. So I look forward to your data gathering exercise.
Did you say Michigan had a system or did not?
They do not.
Okay.
And they have similar to what Ohio has granted, back-end access into the licensees' systems, and they're all in one area. They're in Detroit.
Right.
So when I talked to their gaming control board, they said they thought about this and they made the decision to go with just the back-end access, and they don't have to travel around as much, so it's easier to just be in one location.
You can hit everybody in one day.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it might be helpful if John went ahead with his presentation, because I know he has a lot of facts that may answer some other questions. And
Well, let me just ask one question. What is our deadline for making this decision if we're going to implement it with Penn?
Well, can I answer that before?
Absolutely.
Before you answer. Part of the question is whether we need to implement it with PEN or later. But I'll let you.
I said if. I mean, I know.
If,
I
right.
understand.
Our current timeline is to have a document that the vendors can respond to late in the summer and to make a decision if we're allowed to go forward, or to make a recommendation to the commission sometime in September. The vendors that we've talked to have said they can implement the data collection model in 6 months, and we can make the adjustments to the infrastructure build pretty easily at this point, where they are in the process.
So if we are going to do this prior to implement this with PEN, the plan would be to have a decision made in September? Is that what you're saying?
I think the concept is we would have an RFR out in September with a decision following in that process. So we would want to know if we're moving forward and sometime in late this year.
When does PEN need to know what we're going to be doing?
I think my initial conversations, and I don't want to be held to this, so I think Lance is behind me. I could always ask him. I think they said around October, November they'd like to know.
November is correct. Okay, that's an important date. I mean, you're right. We don't necessarily have to implement it with PEN, but we want to make that a conscious decision, not an inadvertent decision. So that November deadline is a very, very important one that we really fully understand and back down from, so we don't miss it, and we don't lose the opportunity to make that deadline if we decide we want to.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure the commissioners, the PEN letter, if anybody in their hard copy was looking for it, is behind actually the position tab of 5D. So if the commissioners are looking for it, that's where it.
Can I ask a question on the slide that you were just in? And I know John will get into the technical aspect later, but the last bullet says that assumes that there would be 2 to 3 FTEs per shift. This just dovetails into what Commissioner Cameron was asking. But the last sentence says there would be 6 plus 6, so a total of 12 with a non-CMS operation. Is that per property?
No, that would be, John and I just pulled these off the top of our heads and looking at other staffing patterns. We wouldn't have the benefit of a second system auditing it, so we'd actually have to have people that know the proprietary systems and be able to go out and do regular audits of them. So I would need additional accounting and revenue audit team. John would need a team of IT people that know the systems inside and out, know the cabinets inside and out. We wouldn't have a system monitoring that for us. And then we haven't even talked about if there's a need for additional gaming agents, or if that can be covered under both of our areas, or give up some of the finance revenue auditors and have more people in the financial investigations unit.
Well,
and then you're looking at 10% audit versus 100% daily.
Yep. Well, as Commissioner McHugh said, I look forward to the additional data. Now that you will visit jurisdictions that don't manage CMS but manage otherwise, there will be additional data to look at.
So I'm going to make an attempt to not be technical and to get you to the concept of what we're talking about, regulating with data, digital regulation. If you think of each slot machine as a computer of sorts that can be either give information out or be communicated to and from another computer, that's essentially what we're talking about. The old technology, the slot accounting systems that have existed and do exist now, give out a set of data. It's pretty rudimentary, but it has all of the items that operators need to understand about the transactions of the machine. It's not interactive. There's a new standard, which we've talked about.
And how does that communicated with? How is that?
So
data
there is
collected?
there's logic in the board. There are micro switches.
Okay, but it's an electronic connection.
It's an electronic connection.
Yeah, okay,
yes,
yeah.
slot accounting system. It's an electronic connection that can send transactional activity that occurs on the platform outward. The Gaming Standards Association has come up with a set of standards, which is a new protocol set, which has evolved. We talked about this, I think, once before. Since about 2006, they've been working on a standard which is now finding its way into machines in the industry. G2S stands for game to system, and S2S is system to system. And this is an enhanced and more robust ability of the electronic gaming devices to communicate with a managed system. Now, each operator, even without a central management system on the part of the regulator, the operator has a house system that they use to collect the information and to manage the slot machines. So that's the model in some jurisdictions where that's the system of record and that's the system that's audited. If you have 4 operators in your jurisdiction, your staff, if they're auditing, need to, as Derek mentioned, would need to know, the nuances of each of those 4 systems. There's a number of premier ones. I think Penn uses Aristocrat and one other. So they would have a house system. Their proposal was that we audit that. A central management system takes the same data as the house system and stores it and makes it available to the commission to use for financial, forensic investigation, any type of due diligence on transactions that happen at the slot machine. That's the difference. We would have a set of data in our central repository. The operator would have a set of data. That's the difference in the model. The diagram you see here is just trying to depict in a visual that concept of kind of dual data collection or redundant data collection. This would be for the single model. If you go to the next slide, Artem.
Before you leave
Sure,
that one,
absolutely,
could I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Is there any model in which the operator systems communicate with a storage system that we have, so that you piggyback on electronically, piggyback on what the operator's collecting?
So Derek and I had a conversation about the concept that we would look to develop something that would take a data feed from the operator system and to be able to take sets of data from each of the people that we license, create some kind of a repository on our own. That's not the model that we were looking at where we have an operator that does it, but it's certainly one of the scenarios that we'll present to you in our final analysis.
Okay.
Is what would the cost be if we did this kind of middle of the road? We'll collect the data from the operator system and we'll use that to.
And that just to follow through and make sure I understand that, if that were feasible and economical, that would obviate the need to put sensors in each, or to take a feed from the sensor in each machine. You'd take the aggregate from the operator's data collection.
We would be dependent upon the operator to provide us data that we ask for. Hopefully, the way they have their system configured, it collects that data. In most cases, I would say that would be the case, yeah.
Right.
So,
Mr. Glennon, I would be interested in knowing how often there are anomalies. How often is the information incorrect or there's a problem? Do you know what I'm saying? I think that would be an important piece to really evaluate how important this is.
Okay.
Is this, I don't know that information. I did read Penn's letter, which said everyone feels like they're regulating very well, no matter which system they're using, kind of a thing. So I just would be interested in using this upgraded system. How does it, to what extent does it really give us information that's that there's an issue. There is an issue, which we may not have been able to identify just through audits. I just don't know that.
Part of the problem is it's a good question. It's a really good question. I've had this same thought. There is the problem that it's hard to know because you have the system in place. People play by the rules, and you don't have any problems. You don't know how much having the system in place it prevents problems.
When you say
As
play
well
by
as
the
in
rules, is there any evidence that because the system isn't in place, companies are actually trying to do something differently than report accurate data?
So I don't think it comes down to a sense of trying to mislead. I'm going to be honest with you. On the site visits we've gone, I haven't seen the sense to try and mislead, but it's timing of moves. It's whether upgrades to certain software are implemented. So if our gaming lab comes back and says, there's a problem with this piece of software working with this component in a cabinet, this central monitoring system will pick up on it, and it'll either let you disable the game, which I know people have problems with, but if it's not going to give the right payouts, we probably don't want that working on a floor, nor does the operator. Or it will give you a time period to say, okay, at the next opportunity to work with the licensee, shut it down, and you know that this is a problem piece of equipment. On the accounting side, because these are, and we have specific instances, so one of the pieces of Penn's letter that is accurate is depending on when the snapshot is taken, if you're comparing two systems. If the casino takes their snapshot at 4 a.m. or 4:05 a.m. and we take ours at 4 a.m., every machine that someone's playing on is going to have a different meter reading. There's an easy way to accommodate for that. You can say anything under $100 we're not going to look at because they'll balance out the next day when that machine isn't being played at that time and the meters will tie out. But where you do get into problems because these are meters running off of software, running off of complicated mathematical equations. Sometimes there are clears, sometimes the meters aren't reset. When they turn, you'll get different readings, and if you don't have a separate system to compare to, and it can happen on our side too, where we'll say we didn't accommodate for the meter spinning all the way around once you hit the full number of nines, and you're taking a misaccurate reading from one day to the next. Or the operator could be doing the same thing. You get a large variance in what the payout for that machine, what the daily tax rate for that one machine could be. I think when we went to Ohio, we saw one that the intralot system had pulled that was, I think it swayed it by about $20,000 for one machine in one day, the tax, so.
But I wonder, my question really was, how often does that occur?
We could get you more statistics on that, but it's often enough that they got the comparison to figure out when that was happening versus when it's just a difference in when the operator took their snapshot versus when they take theirs.
And I think the redundancy element which you are articulating is one that becomes a judgment call. How satisfied are you of, are we really, of variances? How often do they occur, obviously, and if you have an entirely redundant system, you could always check against the other. But
and there are in between models that we've seen, and that's what John and I are going to take a look at. Can we get a daily feed from each operator? What would it cost to build a system in-house that takes that feed and then compares that day to what the next day is, and see if everything's approved, and are there other options out there of asset management rather than going through these systems. So we're going to take a look at that because we don't want to put unnecessary costs in. And I think our conversation with Penn was very constructive to say, take a look at other options, see what other people are doing.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about is, it's not just the transactional data, the finance transactions that we're concerned about. The way we're going to regulate the electronic gaming devices is by having an certified independent test laboratory certify a platform to operate in our jurisdiction. And from that certified platform, there'll be a signature of that particular device. And that signature will have to be the same for every instance of that machine that the operators and the manufacturers bring into our jurisdiction. What the central monitoring or management system allows us to do is to see in real time, or as these machines come online, does the signature of the machine that is being brought online on the floor in that facility match the one that's authorized to operate in our jurisdiction? And we have the ability to, if the signature does not match, to disable that machine from the central location. So the reason that we're staffing 7x24 is our people would have eyes onto the ongoing operations of these electronic gaming devices as the operations are taking place. And so it's real-time monitoring of what's going on the floor and management of the asset.
But it's like anything else. Are those resources, does this happen daily, monthly, maybe once a year? That's a critical piece for me, to decide how to use resources wisely.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. But there are a lot of manual processes that are in places in jurisdictions around, as Derek mentioned, asset management, that I think a system would be able to provide more efficiencies. But I think we'll have to present that and make that case.
We're all saying the same thing in different flavors, I think. Cost-benefit is what we really need to drill down into and figure out what makes the most sense.
Okay. On that first chart, the next slide, I think, are those two, the operator systems and the property data collection, are those two systems identical?
No. So the operator system would be whatever the operator chose
I don't mean identical. I mean functionally identical. I mean, do they do, or does the operator collect data that we would not be collecting?
Yes, the operator has systems attached to their system, such as player management systems, which we do not have an interest in. However, on both cases, we're looking at responsible gaming framework, and one of the things that Mark is looking at is pre-commitment management. That would be done in the back end in a player management system, and would be part of the house system. But it's collecting the same data, different systems.
Yeah. But we do have a mandate in the law to get the player management, anonymized player management data for other use. So
we do. That will be done actually by the operator in periodic data feeds to the research entity that Mark is working with. Yeah, we're not going to take possession of that data because of it. So if you take this model, I think the next slide, I just want to show how it scales up. Independent of whatever the operator chooses to run as their house system, we would be collecting all the data and be able to have access to all the data from all the properties that we manage, both forensically and real time. And that's, the construction of a network, the connections to 4 facilities, there is a cost to that. The wiring, because of the way technology has changed and because of the standards, as of 2017, our regulations require machines use the GSA standard.
G2S.
I'm sorry, G2. Oh, no, the GSA, the Gaming Standards Association standard, the GSA standard, which is G2S. Yes, correct. And the wiring will be you won't need what is a black box right now in order to get a bifurcated feed of data to 2 systems. There's a system management interface board which needs to be kind of put in, to get non-technical. So the cost of the infrastructure won't be that incrementally significant.
To put an additional wire while construction is going on, in other words.
Yes, I don't think that the cost of the wiring to a cage that would hold our hardware is going to be significant in terms of
But that's something that Ben needs to know by October.
Yes.
Essentially.
Correct. So, I think you get the idea. We want to collect the data. We want to have access to all of the the sets of data coming off the platforms. I'm not going to go into all of the features and functions that we basically, the next several slides talk about all of the bells and whistles that would be available to us if we were to go with the central management system model. I have to qualify and say that these features and functions were gleaned from the vendors that we talked about, so some vendors may offer them, some may not. We would ask for, I think, most or many of them in the request for proposal if we're allowed to continue to pursue this course of action. So.
I don't have anything else to add. I think mainly what this says is it gives us an electronic format what has been collected in a hard copy and audit as a test percentage in other jurisdictions format. And I think that we have to come back to you with a cost comparison and tell you the benefits and the detracts from each scenario. So what do you get under this? What don't you get? What do you get under this scenario? What don't you get? And
I think we'd also like to be able to continue to pursue the development of a requirements document and continue our conversations with the vendors and possibly even get into a procurement cycle at some point.
so we're going to continue drafting a scope. We have other documents, but we will not bring that to you until the decision is made to either move forward with this or not. That way we're not a couple months behind, because some of the RFRs we've seen are rather thick in the technical language.
Right.
So we want to make sure that.
So are we going to pursue, are you going to be looking at two options or three? Two options would be the audit method with no central repository at all. The other option would be the central management system that we're talking about here, but then there's the intermediary
We'll call it a data feed.
Data collection.
Data collection.
Yeah. So you pursue
all three
cost
options.
benefits of all three options. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I just want to say that it's clear that you've all learned a lot on on the technical aspect, the functional aspect. I know we're pushing to get a little bit more in terms of comparison, but there's been quite a bit of research already undertaken. Some of the site visits you've taken are looks like they were very productive. A couple more is really going to tie everything together, hopefully. So
I would also add that Derek has added Bruce Band to the team, so IEB is represented, and I think having him understand the data that would be of value to the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau is an important component of this as well. So we welcome him to the team.
Right. Right. Great.
Yeah, I was going to make the same observation. I'm really impressed that you guys you talk like you actually understand this stuff. You know what it's doing.
We get good crib notes.
That's what you pay me for, I hope.
Right. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are back to Director Day.
That gets us to that was the final item for the budget information that we needed to bring back to the commission, and we'll follow up as we've been discussing. The next item to see is the master licensing schedule.
Right. How about if we take a quick break?
Sure.
Back in 5. All right, we are reconvening meeting 124, and we are to item 5C, Director Day and Ombudsman Ziemba.
Commissioners, today we're providing an update on the Region C schedule. As a reminder, at the beginning of April, the Commission extended the Region C RFA2 application date from July 23rd to September 23rd at the earliest. In order to meet the September 23rd deadline, an applicant will need to receive a majority vote at a referendum prior to that deadline. In addition, there is a 10-day, as the Commission is aware, there's a 10-day certification period requirement in cities for election results. Prior to the referendum, an applicant, as we all know, must execute a host community agreement 60 to 90 days before the referendum. The dates reflecting these requirements are shown in a chart that's in your packet, and it's actually the more simplistic
Next slide.
version. The next slide. So, of note, based on this analysis, a host community agreement would need to be executed no later than this Saturday, June 14th, to satisfy the 90-day requirement, and July 14th to satisfy the 60-day requirement. As of this date, we are aware of no such executed host community agreements in Region C. The Commission has stated that it would revisit the September 23rd deadline. The Commission has also discussed that further changes may be necessary to the Commission's requirements in order to promote competition in the region. However, there's a question whether the Commission should entertain further changes either to its deadline or to its requirements today, or whether or not it should have a discussion after the July 14th 60-day HCA deadline. Over the last several months, the parties have asked for some policy changes and extensions. For example, parties have inquired into the current policy that specifies which entities may apply for a license in Region C. Since the summer of 2013, the policy has been that the applicant pool is limited to those entities that applied by the September 30th, 2013 RFA1 application date and all current applicants. As is evidenced by a letter we received yesterday from the Claire Vest Group and Claremont Companies, there is a request to allow new entities to apply for a license, even though those entities did not apply by the September 30th, 2013 deadline, or whether or not that entity is not a current applicant. The current policy was formulated to help expedite a license in Region C by setting an early RFA1 deadline and allowing those applicants that were already proceeding through our background checks to compete. Before the Commission discusses whether or not to discuss further changes now or after the expiration of the 60-day HCA deadline in early July, I will ask Director Wells to provide you a brief understanding of our current Region C background checks. On our current schedule, and Artem, we can go back to the other schedule. On our current schedule, we anticipate that background checks would be completed by the middle of August, with reports completed by the beginning of August in order to make the September 23rd deadline.
I'm sorry, say that part one more time.
So under our current schedule of September 23rd, background checks would need to be completed by the middle of August, and the reports from the IEB completed earlier than that, a few weeks earlier than that, to submit to the Commission by the beginning of August. That's what we anticipate. You can have a little later date, obviously, but as you get closer to the September 23rd deadline, you shrink the period of comfort by which we can ensure that background checks are completed prior to the application date.
Does that assume a whole suitability adjudicatory hearings?
Well, no, not necessarily. Just a hearing before the Commission, either on additional qualifiers.
Because a regular suitability, I'm sorry, an adjudicatory hearing would be lengthier, but we don't anticipate that given the restriction to current applicants. Or we don't know.
I can't tell.
We cannot tell.
You never know.
Okay.
I mean, I can update the Commission that I am sitting here in the same position I've been in for months, where the IEB has yet to receive a complete deal from any applicant. So it's impossible for me to project with precision whether or not I could complete an investigation by the beginning of August or into July. Now we're, into mid-June. We have certain parties that have expressed an interest, and they keep us updated on their efforts to complete a deal and put something together. And I do believe they're making those efforts in good faith. But unless and until I have a complete package from them, I can't report to the Commission on a projection. Should an applicant just put together a deal with people that have already been through the suitability process? Yes, we could finish that by August, but I don't know that at this point. And if they bring in partners, and I have to investigate corporations and several individuals, and I don't even have those, the completed forms yet to begin the process. That may not be completed by the projected date in the beginning of August.
So we have a couple, well, I guess we have one question before us, really, which is, do we want to do anything more now on the deadlines? And that could include extending the present deadline under the present rules, or it could be as Claire Vest suggested, recommended, or wished for, which would be to open it up to new applications. Does anybody have thoughts about the Claire Vest letter, and pros and cons, just sort of in general on that idea of opening up?
I, like all of us, have been thinking about this, and this state of affairs has been in sort of a lockdown mode since I don't know when. We've extended the deadline. That hasn't yielded a completed package. And I don't have any evidence in front of us to suggest that extending it again would change the dynamics. We hear through Ombudsman Ziemba about a number of moving parts, but the moving parts haven't coalesced into any solid framework. They don't appear to be doing that. And so I am beginning to wonder, actually more than beginning to wonder, whether our restriction to people who've already cleared the people who filed on the initial filing deadline of January 1st of this year, and those who had previously been qualified is going to work. And so my thought, subject to discussion here, would be that we ought to perhaps wait until July 11, to July, whatever the deadline is, see if anything happens, probably won't, and at that point ought to open it up again. Just start over.
Is there any indication, have we ever had any indication that there was a new player that we would, if we'd been able to open it up again, that some deal would have come together?
Well, from public accounts and the account that we have in the letter today from Claremont and Claire Vest, they are not a current applicant, but Claremont and Claire Vest have indicated that they would like to apply for the license. And they currently are disallowed from applying for the license because they have not been able to team up with a current applicant.
Right.
They didn't submit an application by the deadline.
Right. They didn't submit an application by the deadline, but their problem has been that they can't find an operator who is interested. Even though we have a host of pre-qualified operators who are not presently bidding, their problem has been they can't get anybody to think the deal makes sense.
They I think we're saying the same thing. They cannot find an operator that is currently an applicant.
Right. Right.
Or in our current rules apply to applicants, not to qualifiers. So you have to be an applicant to proceed,
right?
Not just a qualifier.
I think that's key. When we made the restriction relative to applicants, in other words, LLCs in Massachusetts with all their parties, not qualifiers, now looking back, has had, in my opinion, the effect of really limiting the possibilities here.
Yeah, and we're aware of other applicants previous that may have made sense in one jurisdiction to be a team and may not moving forward, and that's problematic, correct? They're not allowed to move forward as a partial applicant.
As a qualifier.
I think that there was a prior discussion, without getting into any details about any conversations we may or may not have with folks. There was a prior conversation before the commission where Director Wells and Council Blue discussed the issue of qualifiers, and different qualifiers may want to team with different qualifiers to put together a full application.
For all those reasons, I think Commissioner McHugh's suggestion makes sense.
The only other variable that I don't think causes a disconnect with what Commissioner McHugh said is that we do have a competitive situation in Region A, and by the mid-September, there will be a decision made by the other 4 commissioners on that license. Somebody, at least one party, won't get it and might be interested in Region C. And there's no way for us to know until that plays out. But that's a perfectly realistic possibility. So I think from this, never mind the issue of opening up to new applicants, a significant enough extension of time to permit a non-winner in Region A to think about Region C is worthwhile. So, but I think that just complements what you were saying. So I think my instinct too would be, you know, we have to put a stake in the ground here somewhere, and maybe let's give it enough more months to both accommodate the possible non-winner in Region A and to give new parties a chance. I'm not very optimistic it's going to make much difference. I don't think that's really what the problem here is, but you never know, and we might as well give it a shot.
I would say that it's not an impossibility, obviously, for a party to put together an application with the current deadline. There still is another month or so for a host community agreement, but it is clear that by the middle of July, that will be an impossibility. But all the conversations that the commission has had, there are a number of obviously competing interests of opening up to competition, but at the same time not having a period extended so long that Region C falls far behind. And so when and if we have this conversation now or July, I think we'll just need to be cognizant that we need to try to strike a perfect balance there on finding a period that, if indeed we open it up, that doesn't extend too long so Region C falls behind, that allows Director Wells and her team to do the background investigations.
But
it's
John,
a little bit of a tricky mix.
Well, not really, because we're not talking about Region C falling behind. We're talking about Region C not having any options at all. We're not talking about delaying a process now. We're making a process possible. So I don't think Region C falling behind is really the concern at this point. It's Region C falling off the map completely.
Well, yes, but I agree with you, Chairman, but we certainly have heard numerous parties express interest in Region C, especially after the Commission discussed a lot of different options earlier this year. And so even though we may not have an applicant by the July 14th date, there is a potential of teams putting together an application.
Well, I agree with that, but
yeah.
I know we already talked about this, and I don't think between now and July 12th is the reason to kind of change. But I still believe that the minimum capital investment is bearing into some of these dynamics, or at least might be. But however,
we changed that though.
Marginally, but we did.
right. What else could we have done that we didn't
Include the land cost, include financing costs, capitalizable under generally accepted accounting principles. We've excluded all of that. We've excluded a lot of operating costs, and that's, I would argue, probably fair to continue excluding. Licensing fee, I think it's also fair to exclude. But the two big ones are land and financing costs.
The statute gave us the flexibility on
yes,
that, right?
it really did. Now, having said that, though, the real data point that I think with it being so near, we ought to just let play out is July 12th, because then we would really know whether we have an applicant or not, or whether any of these parties under the current mode can put together whatever they could put together. And understanding the landscape at that point, depending on what we have, we may decide that we really need to bring up the not just outside qualifiers, not just qualifiers extended not from applicants, but include qualifiers, include additional qualifiers or additional applicants, and/or include modifications to the minimum capital investment. But it would be as if let's finish up the bidding process or the procurement process that we set out to do, and after July 12th, we can then, we would then reopen in any number of additional fashions.
One thing I'd like to note is that that July 14th date, even though there was that, say if an applicant gets here by that at July 14th date, as this past week's experience should demonstrate to everyone, just because an applicant can meet a specific deadline with an application, the Commission does a very, very exhaustive, thorough review of all of these applications. And there's absolutely no guarantee of, even if you're the only applicant, that you're going to receive a license. And,
right.
And we need quality applications, not just an application that meets a specific deadline.
Well, and the July 14th date is not an application deadline, it's a host community deadline under the current schedule, right? So, so there would have to be not only a completed package, but a host community agreement, and so that's a real test. Do we have a really viable application by that date? Viable in the sense of having a local acceptance. So I think that would tell us it may get knocked out as the investigation goes forward, but then we start over again. I guess my bottom line is I just don't see what utility we can reasonably expect from simply extending a deadline again, rather than holding to this deadline, seeing what happens, and then rethinking our premises.
I agree.
Well,
notwithstanding, I take your point about the Region A loser, perhaps.
Right.
But they wouldn't be prohibited from doing the same thing if we adopted the different approach.
Well, under this timeline, they're prohibited. Under this timeline, they're prohibited as a practical matter.
That's right.
Right. The
Well,
thing is,
exactly how? Exactly how are they prohibited from this time frame?
Well, the decision for Region A is expected now in early September.
Right.
But remember, the preclusion, nobody's precluded from applying to more than one region.
Oh, well.
They're precluded from obtaining more than one license.
Right, but I don't think anybody's.
But as a practical matter, no.
Nobody does. All right.
Yeah, right.
I'm just exercising theory here.
Yeah. Well, let me play this out too, because yes, there is a possibility there could be a bidder by July 14th. How big is debatable? How big a possibility is debatable? There is a possibility. But if we end up with only one, if we do end up with a proposal on the 14th, I mean, the most that could possibly happen is that we'll have one. I mean, I think the likelihood we're going to have more than one by the 14th is just not worth worrying about. So if we have one proposal, one isn't good, for all the reasons we've been discussing for a long time. Springfield's a whole different story. That was 5, ended up down to 1. But having only one from the outside is clearly suboptimal. 2, if we don't particularly like it, we don't want to, at that point, change the rules. I mean, if somebody comes in by July 14th, we can't change the rules anymore. That would just be dramatically unfair.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it seems to me if we've said this is the deadline and somebody goes through the trouble to make it happen and meet the deadline, I mean, if we investigated them and decided that they weren't satisfactory and we went through the whole evaluation process, we don't have to make the award to them. But to have one person meet the deadline and then change the deadline, that seems really unfair to me. I'd much rather change the deadline now when there's nobody in. Nobody's ox is being gored if we change the deadline now.
I wouldn't fight that. I just question whether it would be unfair. We have stressed from the beginning that, and I think the evidence shows that competition dramatically increases the yield. And the absence of competition, it seems to me, would be a bona fide basis for changing the deadline. But I take your point.
Okay. But if in that case, you know, we might as well make the decision now. If we're sort of predisposed, in the unlikely event that we do have a bidder, we're kind of predisposed to not wanting to go forward with only one.
Right.
We might as well just do it now, and take the pressure off. You know, let's think backwards. What deadline would we have to set in order to give a Region A loser a chance, A, and B, if we adopt Commissioner McHugh's idea of opening it up again for new applicants, to give new applicants a chance to get organized? So what would, think that through, what would that be? March? You know, would March do it? What date would that be?
Well, you just have to work backwards from the 90-day requirement. So you were, let's call it a 100-day requirement if you include the certification period.
Yeah.
So a host community agreement would have to be in place for 100 days prior to the application deadline.
So,
and so if we're making our decision
so March
on
would
Region
make it,
A in September, you add 100 days to that at a minimum, obviously.
so using the 100, so March would mean February, right? The first of January. You'd have to have your host community agreement by January 1st, more or less.
Or, you know, if the decision's made in September, let's just say that you have to have your host community agreement in place by October. So October plus 3 months, November, December, January, and then another 10 days.
But a month isn't, but a month between the Region A decision and having the host community agreement isn't enough time. I mean, if somebody loses in Region A and wants to rejigger Region C, it's going to take them
Correct.
3 months anyway. So I think you got to give at least 3 months for the host community agreement, and then 3 months after that. So basically, September plus 6 months would be what? Is that March?
February, March.
Yeah. October, November, December, January, February, March, yeah. So if we picked, say, March 15th, I'm just thinking out loud here, but if we picked March 15th and we opened it up to new applicants, and maybe we leave open the question, I think the issue of rethinking the capital structure is something we wouldn't have to decide at this moment. But we leave that on the table to think about that a little bit. But at this moment, we say July 14th, or sorry, September is gone. We are going to make it 6 months later, which gives Region A a chance, and it will invite new applicants.
I would not oppose that. I would like to, as we've done with everything else, let it sit out there for 2 weeks and get comments on it. But I wouldn't oppose it. It certainly is better than extending the deadline, and it's, in my view, simply extending the deadline, and it recognizes the likelihood that we're not going to have competitive proposals by the deadline.
And waiting 2 weeks is fine with me, because we've now signaled the possibility. So
right.
It's clear we're not going to unduly prejudice somebody now if they happen to slink in under the 14th. So
well, not slink in if they.
Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
I mean, we
sorry.
welcome with open arms.
I think there's a number of assumptions you've made, Mr. Chairman, that I think we need to be careful about. You're saying one application will be perhaps not sufficient.
Well, it would be suboptimal.
Suboptimal. Remember that one competitor is facing a competitive scenario with a tribal operation. So there's a calculation there relative to, proximity and other things. We have, of course, the ability to award or not, and that we have always retained the commercial license based on a number of other developments at the federal level. Very hard to predict. You're also assuming in your last statement or set of statements that that there will be the high likelihood that a Region A loser would want to move into Region C.
I didn't say that at all. I just said it might happen. I wouldn't say high likelihood.
High likelihood?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no idea
Maybe
whether they would or not.
Well, I guess that's where I was going. We just don't know. Maybe I misunderstood it. But I think that there's a real I'm feeling it's such a close proximity to July 12th, which is the real date by which we understand the landscape, that we ought to let that come to fruition and make a decision, much like you were suggesting, at that point, whether the and trying to make that decision now, so close to that significant milestone, is just not my preference.
But suppose we do that, which was my initial thinking and still remains a viable option. And suppose we got one application. Would your view be that that was it? We consider that application, or would it be your view that it would be fair if we took an initial look and thought competition might improve the offer, that we could extend the deadline?
We could extend the deadline too, right. That's standard operating procedure on all kinds of procurements. We retain the ability to reject anybody who comes in.
Well, not necessarily reject.
Not send back or change. We don't have to accept anybody who comes in. I mean, we can take them at any level of review, but we're not required to follow through on any one application. We can suspend at any time, given investigations, given detail of phase 2, completion of the parties.
I'd like before we go too far, although I suggested it in a very cavalier way, the more I think about it, I'd like the legal team to take a look at that. And if we've now sort of brainstormed for a while, if we let the brainstorming hang out there for 2 weeks, that'd be time for them to do that as well. I'm having slight second thoughts about whether we could, after getting the application by the deadline, whether we could then extend it. Right. I don't know one way or the other. I just think that's something we need to
I'm not saying to do that immediately, by the way. We could,
No, I understand.
We could see it through.
I understand.
We would have to see what it is.
All I'm saying is we need to check and see what our latitude is.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense, too, to have the legal team check, and if we get comments, I'm sure there are things we haven't thought of in this 15-minute discussion.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with the 2 weeks to hear. I'm totally fine with that. I want to restate that I'm really uncomfortable with the idea of letting somebody come in by the 14th, right, and then extending the deadline. Think of how unfair it is to all the parties that would be racing to get a deal done. You wouldn't be. You can imagine, the pressure on the parties to make a deal in order to get under that deadline, which if they had more time, they would do in a much more business-like fashion. Or you can imagine that set of possibilities, and to turn around after they've signed agreements and stuff, really feels not right to me at all.
I want to make sure the record reflects. I wasn't suggesting that we would extend just because we get one application, that we would immediately extend the deadline or change it without looking at that one application. there would, I would assume that we would follow a lot of the review that we do, and we would have to be convinced that there is not or there is a viable application. I don't think that day two, after receiving just one application, is something we ought to assume would happen.
But the record will reflect that I did suggest that, and now I'm having second thoughts about it. So, I mean, that's...
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else, Commissioner?
So we're all agreed that the 14th is, we're not extending the current deadline of the 23rd, which backs up to the July.
At the moment, no. What we're doing is putting on the table the idea of extending the deadline for 6 months from September and reopening and opening it up to new applicants and leaving on the table the issue of the minimum capital investment. And that proposal's on the table. We are going to do some legal research and we are going to invite comment. And 2 weeks from today, we will decide whether or not to make that adjustment or some other adjustment.
Is it also fair in this comment period, and I can't recollect whether we've asked for this before, but
we have.
Are there other extenuating circumstances as to, it's not just you applicants being frozen out, but whether there are other issues at hand that are scaring people away from this application period?
Yeah, so I highly support the comment period because there's obviously interests that are not testifying today, have not submitted letters today. Right. There are a number of different communities that have expressed an interest in maintaining the current deadline in the past. I'm sure that they'll want to weigh in on this possibility. And so we will encourage all parties qualify as applicants to be on the record as we go into the next
and essentially
meeting.
With any comments reflective of the competitive environment in Regency.
Correct. We want all of your comments, and I know that there's a lot that is being discussed, but we really need people to submit their ideas at this point.
Which would be great, and I'm in agreement with. I'll remind ourselves that we already had a healthy dose of public comment when we last extended the current deadline. The current deadline was July, if I'm not mistaken.
Current deadline was July, exactly.
The prior deadline, I'm sorry.
Yep.
We extended it to September. And at that time, we got a number of really good, thoughtful comments relative to extending it further than the current deadline. There were interests saying it should be October 31st. There were other interests saying it should be December 31st.
Correct.
So it's great that we would hopefully get an update to that, but I think that also bears into, at least in my view, the last I saw this, there may be need for a lot more time to put together these proposals.
And I'm not mistaken, the last round of comments that we heard, we did not hear from one potential operator. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. Right. Okay, so that's on the table. John will help orchestrate feedback, and anybody, we're looking for help and guidance and advice on this, so we're open to as much feedback as possible, reinforcing Commissioner Stebbins' point. All right, must be, what time? Just about 1?
Yep, 5 to 1.
1 o'clock.
We don't have much more, do we?
Yeah, let's see what we have.
We've got PEN, we've got the emergency regulations, and then delegation of authority.
Well, I'm open to do whatever everyone wants. We can stop for lunch, or we can plow through. I think it'll probably take us a little while, but...
What do we have, another hour's worth of work?
How long do you
here?
think, can you estimate what we've got? Well, I guess on the...
Well, the longest item would be, or potentially longest, would be the discussion of the gaming position issue. We have a presentation and then that letter. That's item D under administration.
All right, so I think the mild consensus is let's take a break. So should we do 45 minutes? So what time is it now?
1 o'clock.
Just try
1:40. Try 1:45?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.